So, I want you to picture yourself in what is arguably, the most mundane, repetitive situation of your entire daily life.
Oh, I think I can guess where this is going.
Yeah. You are sitting in your car. It is the morning commute.
Right, the absolute classic scenario.
Exactly. You have got your hands resting on the steering wheel. Maybe you are sipping a lukewarm coffee. The radio is playing softly in the background.
Yeah.
And you are just surrounded by a sea of thousands of other cars, like just metal boxes stretching out for miles.
Red brake lights pulsing as far as the eye can see.
Right, and everyone is just inching forward at a crawl. And the thing is, for hours every single day, millions of us commit this act that is slowly, methodically poisoning the local, regional, and honestly, the global environment.
And the truly wild part about all of this is that we do it without a second thought.
We really do. It is completely normalized. You turn the key, you put it in drive, and you just, well, you don't think about it.
It really is the ultimate blind spot of modern civilization.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, we are so incredibly conditioned to the convenience and, frankly, the necessity of the automobile that the byproduct of that convenience has just become background noise.
Right.
Or, to be more precise about the source material we are looking at today, background chemistry. We just accept it as the cost of doing business in a modern society.
Exactly. And today, for our deep dive into this topic, we are going to trace the exact life cycle of that background chemistry.
It is a fascinating life cycle.
It really is. Our mission here is to unpack all the sources we have and connect the dots between your tailpipe and the chemical destruction of our ecosystems.
Right. We are looking at the exact mechanics of what needs to happen to stop this pollution at the source.
Right, like inside the engine block itself. And then we're going to follow the exhaust that escapes.
Yeah, embarking on a journey up into the atmosphere.
Exactly, to see what happens when those invisible gases aren't stopped. We will see how they transform the sky into like an acid-producing factory.
It is pretty terrifying, honestly.
Yeah, it is. And we will see how that acid comes back down to literally dissolve human history and suffocate aquatic life.
It is a profound chain reaction. What starts as a seemingly invisible gas on a highway in the morning, it ends up fundamentally altering the biological and architectural makeup of our world.
Yeah.
And it is entirely driven by a sequence of chemical reactions that are, well, as fascinating as they are destructive.
I am naturally a curious person, but I have to admit, digging into the research on this gave me a bit of a chill.
Oh, absolutely.
Because before we look at the catastrophic effects, the dissolving buildings, the dying forests, the poisoned lakes, we really have to start at the source.
Right, the internal combustion engine and the human behavior surrounding it.
Yeah, exactly. The reality is that causing air pollution through auto exhaust is quite possibly the most common air polluting act which an average citizen commits daily. Like, we do it for hours.
And we do it without considering the consequences. That is the psychological crux of the issue right there.
Right.
I mean, you are inside a climate-controlled cabin. You are isolated from the process. The explosions happening inside your engine block are muffled.
Yeah, and the exhaust is routed out the back behind you where you can't even see it.
Exactly, and it just disperses into the air.
It's like we treat the atmosphere as this infinite, invisible landfill that we just assume will sort itself out.
That is a great way to put it, an invisible landfill.
Right. Because you roll down the window on a sunny day, the air seems mostly clear to the naked eye, so your brain just tells you everything is fine.
But the data in the sources is completely explicit here. Poisoning the air is creating a massive problem with immediate local, regional, and long-term global effects.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, without a healthy natural environment, there are no healthy humans, plants, or animals. It's a house of cards.
It really is.
But, here is where I really want to push back a little bit on how we approach this.
Okay, go for it.
So much of the analysis we have focuses heavily on the role of the government. It mandates that government must do short-term as well as long-term planning to preserve the natural world.
Right.
But why is this solely falling on the shoulders of the government? Like, can't the average citizen, if they are just given the right information, simply make the choice to drive less?
Well, that is a very common perspective.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating here is that if we look at the sheer scale of the problem, relying on individual action completely falls apart.
Really? How so?
When we talk about citizens committing this act without considering the consequences, we are looking at a classic collective action problem. In economics, this is known as the tragedy of the commons.
No, right. Okay.
If you, as one individual person, decide to drive your car to the grocery store, Your specific impact on the global atmosphere is, well, it's negligible.
It's a drop in the ocean.
Exactly. But because our entire society, our urban sprawl, our supply chains, our whole economic infrastructure has been built exclusively around the combustion engine over the last century, individual choice is largely an illusion.
Oh, I see. Because you still have to get to work.
Right. You have to take your kids to school, you have to buy groceries.
Yeah, the average citizen cannot single-handedly redesign the urban transit grid.
Exactly. Nor can they formulate and enforce new chemical fuel standards at the refineries.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. Relying on good intentions just isn't going to move the needle when the system itself basically requires you to pollute just to participate in an everyday society.
Precisely. You're
Yeah.
locked into the paradigm. And that is why systemic top-down government intervention is required over individual action.
Right.
You need a centralized authority to engage in both short-term and long-term macro planning.
So it's not just about, like, public awareness campaigns.
No, not at all. This isn't just about throwing up a few arbitrary regulations. It's about a comprehensive re-engineering of how a society powers movement.
Because the consequences are multi-tiered. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have local smog-choking cities. You have regional acid rain destroying agriculture. And you have global greenhouse effects altering the climate.
Yeah, you simply cannot tackle a multi-layered crisis of that magnitude without coordinated macro planning at the highest levels.
So true.
So let's get into the mechanics of that planning.
Okay, let's do it.
If the government is stepping in to do this macro-level intervention, what exactly are they fixing in the short term? Like, we need to move from the philosophy of regulation down to the hard mechanics and the chemistry of the engine itself.
Right, because based on all the engineering and environmental data in the source material, the first crucial step is dealing directly with the fuel we burn and the engine that burns it.
So the short-term plan isn't about reinventing the wheel overnight, then?
No, it focuses on optimization. It's about making the current, fundamentally flawed system of combustion as efficient and clean as chemically possible.
Right, just to hold us over before we can transition away from it entirely.
Right.
So there are a few specific mandates here that constantly come up in the sources. First, improving the quality of the fuel itself by adding anti-knocking agents.
Right, that's step one.
Second, ensuring that automobile combustion engines are highly efficient so they burn the fuel completely. And, the golden rule here is that no unburned hydrocarbon molecules should ever come out of the exhaust pipe.
Which is essentially just raw, vaporized fuel.
Right, exactly. And to catch whatever the engine misses, there is a mandate for catalytic converters on every exhaust.
Crucial piece of tech, yeah.
And finally, there is this massive push to shift away from standard fossil fuels because of what the sources call their impurities and complex molecule nature.
Yes.
The push is toward alternative fuels like methanol, ethanol, and biodiesel.
Let's actually break down the chemistry of why that shift away from fossil fuels is so critical, because it explains almost everything else we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I'd love to.
It all comes down to the complex molecular nature of hydrocarbons. Standard gasoline or diesel is incredibly messy on a microscopic level.
I was actually trying to visualize this when I was prepping for today's deep dive.
Oh, what did you come up with?
Well, it feels like burning complex hydrocarbons is like trying to burn a wet, knotty, sappy log in a campfire.
Oh, that's good.
Right. You throw it on the fire, and instead of a clean, bright, hot flame, you just get this billowing, choking, thick black smoke and soot flying everywhere.
Exact.
But burning these simple molecule alternative fuels like methanol or ethanol, well, that's like tossing a piece of crisp, dry newspaper into the fire.
Right, it catches instantly.
Yeah, it burns brightly and completely, and it leaves almost absolutely nothing behind. It's just a clean, total burn.
That is a phenomenal analogy, and it maps perfectly onto the chemistry.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, if you could zoom in and look closely at a standard fossil fuel molecule, it looks very much like that knotty log. It is a long, tangled, chaotic chain of carbon and hydrogen atoms.
And they have varying lengths and structures mixed together, right?
Exactly. So when you inject that complex soup into a tiny combustion chamber inside your engine and you ignite it with a spark plug in a fraction of a second, well, things go wrong.
What happens?
The oxygen molecules in the chamber don't always have the time, the heat, or the physical space to react with every single carbon atom in that long chain.
Ah.
The chemical reaction is interrupted. It is incomplete.
And that incomplete reaction is exactly what leaves us with those unburned hydrocarbon molecules we mentioned earlier.
Yes, exactly. And unburned hydrocarbons literally mean that raw, vaporized gasoline is escaping the combustion process entirely.
Wow.
It's getting pushed out the tailpipe and right into the air you and I breathe on the sidewalk.
That's disgusting.
But it gets worse.
Oh, great.
When that complex molecular chain breaks down poorly, it doesn't just leave raw fuel. The incomplete combustion produces soot, which is essentially just unburned carbon clumping together into microscopic solid particles.
Right, the black smoke from the wet log.
Exactly. And more dangerously, it produces carbon monoxide.
Okay, let's talk about carbon monoxide, because that is a major issue.
It really is. It is a highly toxic invisible gas that is created when a carbon atom only manages to bond with one oxygen atom instead of two.
Right, because the carbon atom couldn't find that second oxygen atom in the chaotic fraction of a second inside the engine cylinder.
Yes, exactly. It grabbed one, formed CO instead of CO2, and got blasted at the back.
And carbon monoxide is incredibly dangerous to humans.
Oh, extremely.
Because it binds to the hemoglobin in our blood better than oxygen does, basically suffocating you from the inside out if you breathe too much of it.
Exactly. Now let's contrast that messy, knotty log with methanol, ethanol, and biodiesel.
Okay.
These alternative fuels are inherently less polluting because their molecular structure is incredibly simple.
Right, like the dry newspaper.
Yes. Take ethanol, for example. It is a very short, neat, organized little molecule. But here is the real magic.
What's that?
Ethanol already contains an oxygen atom within its own molecular structure. It brings its own oxygen to the party.
Oh, wow. So it doesn't have to scramble to find oxygen from the air in the cylinder.
Precisely. When the spark plug fires, it is vastly easier for the combustion process to reach every part of that simple molecule and fully oxidize it.
Because the oxygen is already right there.
Right. You achieve complete combustion with far less effort. Because the burn is complete, you drastically reduce the production of carbon monoxide, you eliminate the soot, and you vastly reduce the amount of unburned hydrocarbons.
That makes total sense. And that also ties into the anti-knocking agents the sources mention.
Definitely.
From what I understand, engine knocking happens when the fuel-air mixture detonates prematurely in the cylinder before the spark plug even fires, just from the ambient pressure and heat.
Right. It detonates on its own.
Yeah, and it causes a literal shock wave that rattles the engine, literally a knock.
Yes, and it's wildly inefficient.
And it damages the engine, leading to more of that incomplete combustion. So the government mandates anti-knocking additives to smooth out the burn, making it more controlled and complete.
Yes. You want a smooth, controlled burn, not a violent, unpredictable explosion.
Right.
But we also have to remember, even with perfect fuel, perfect anti-knocking agents, and highly efficient engine timing, internal combustion is never 100% perfect.
Because physics is messy.
Exactly. Some pollutants will always be created.
Which is why the government has to mandate catalytic converters.
Yes, the last line of defense.
Right. They act as the absolute last line of defense. You have this metal canister sitting in the exhaust pipe right under the floorboards of your car.
And inside, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it looks like a honeycomb made of precious metals, usually platinum and palladium, right?
Yes, exactly.
And as those unburned hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide gases get pushed through that scorching hot honeycomb, the precious metals act as a catalyst.
Right.
They literally force those harmful gases to react with the remaining oxygen, completing the combustion process outside the engine before it exits the tailpipe.
It is essentially a chemical incinerator strapped to the underside of your vehicle.
That's a great way to think of it.
It is a brilliant piece of mitigation technology. But we have to be clear-eyed about this.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, as effective as anti-knocking agents, efficient engines, alternative simple molecule fuels, and catalytic converters are, they are still just short-term fixes.
Just Band-Aids.
Exactly. They are Band-Aids on a fundamentally flawed concept. They are a way to make the combustion engine less terrible. But they absolutely do not solve the core existential problem of burning things for power.
Which brings us to the ultimate fix.
Yeah.
Because even if we perfectly tune every single engine on planet Earth, even if we burn the absolute purest simple molecule ethanol, and even if we trap every single microscopic speck of soot and carbon monoxide in a massive catalytic converter,
Right.
we still hit a massive unavoidable brick wall.
Carbon dioxide.
Right, CO2.
Yes, and this is where the long-term planning must diverge from the short-term planning.
Okay, explain that.
Because carbon dioxide is not a byproduct of incomplete combustion. Carbon dioxide is the primary intended product of perfect combustion. If an engine runs flawlessly, it produces water vapor and CO2.
So there's no way around it.
None. There is no filter, no additive, and no catalytic converter that can stop a hydrocarbon from producing carbon dioxide when burned.
Wow.
And because CO2 is a potent greenhouse gas that traps thermal radiation in our atmosphere, driving climate change, we have to stop producing it entirely.
So, to avoid using carbon dioxide producing fuels, the long-term mandate laid out in our sources is a transition to battery-powered electric vehicles.
Yes, EVs.
And here is where I have to ask a question that I think a lot of people might be wondering when they look at this macro planning.
Oh, what's that?
Well, shifting to EVs makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
An electric vehicle doesn't burn fuel. It runs on stored chemical energy in a battery, so it doesn't produce any CO2 at the tailpipe.
Exactly.
But in almost every piece of comprehensive urban planning, right alongside the push for EVs, there is a massive mandate for the government to provide efficient public transport in big cities.
Yes, there is.
And it specifically says this is so that people avoid using their own personal vehicles.
Right.
Wait a minute, though. If we just force everyone to buy electric cars, isn't the environmental problem solved?
You would think so.
Right. Like, why does the long-term plan specifically highlight public transport and getting people out of their personal cars?
It's a great question, and it requires us to step back and look at the macro-level geometry and physics of human civilization.
Okay.
Electric vehicles are a phenomenal, necessary technological solution to the chemistry of the tailpipe.
Right. They eradicate the local release of CO2, unburned hydrocarbons, soot, and carbon monoxide.
Exactly. But an EV does not solve the physics of a big city.
Oh, you're talking about those thousands of metal boxes I mentioned at the very start of the show.
Exactly. Let's imagine a massive traffic jam on a major highway outside of a metropolis. 50,000 cars at a dead stop. Even if every single one of those 50,000 cars is a zero-emission electric vehicle, you still have 50,000 heavily manufactured, resource-intensive machines taking up thousands of acres of physical space.
Right, they still take up room.
And you still have the environmental devastation of mining the lithium, cobalt, and nickel for 50,000 massive batteries.
Yeah, that's huge.
You still have the microplastics shedding from 200,000 tires wearing down on the asphalt.
Right.
You still have the massive electrical grid demand to charge millions of individual vehicles simultaneously.
Wow. All of that has a staggering environmental footprint.
It really does.
So an electric traffic jam is still a traffic jam.
Exactly.
It is still a fundamentally inefficient way to move human beings from point A to point B.
Precisely. And that is why efficient public transit, high-speed trains, subterranean subways, advanced dedicated bus networks, that is the ultimate long-term plan.
Because EVs fix the chemistry of the vehicle, but public transit fixes the systemic behavioral issue.
Yes. Moving millions of bodies through a densely packed urban environment. It addresses the very first point we discussed, the act of the daily commute itself.
Right. A single train can remove 1,000 cars from the road.
Easily. If you provide efficient, reliable, clean public transit, you remove the personal vehicle from the equation entirely.
You solve the spatial geometry problem and the resource extraction problem in one fell swoop.
Exactly right.
Okay, so we've established the ideal scenario based on the sources. We have the short-term fixes, better fuel, better engines, catalytic converters.
Right.
And then we have the long-term fixes, electric vehicles, and a massive redesign of urban transit to get people onto trains and buses.
Yep.
But, I mean, we don't live in that ideal world yet.
No, we certainly do not.
The transition is slow. Right now, today, there are still over 1 billion combustion engine cars on the road burning complex fossil fuels.
That's a massive installed base.
So we need to look at the consequences of the present reality. What happens to the pollutants that escape the tailpipes before these grand government plans are fully realized?
Right.
The unburned hydrocarbons, the soot, the carbon dioxide, like where do they actually go?
Well, they drift upwards.
Just up into the sky.
Yeah. They leave the microenvironment of the highway and enter the macroenvironment of the troposphere.
Oh, wow.
And this is where the local annoyance of smog transforms into a regional and even global catastrophe.
Okay, let's get into the atmospheric chemistry of this because it is fascinating and terrifying.
It really is.
The burning of fossil fuels, particularly coal and diesel, but also standard gasoline, produces massive amounts of two specific chemical compounds.
Yes.
Oxides of sulfur which we abbreviate as SO2,
Mm-hmm.
and oxides of nitrogen, which we generally refer to as NOx.
Right.
Now, these gases are hot when they leave the exhaust, so they rise. They don't just sit over the highway where they were produced.
No, they get caught in upper-level wind currents and jet streams.
And they are swept up into the clouds, and when they get there, the sky essentially turns into a chemical weapons factory.
That is honestly not an exaggeration. The meteorological and chemical reactions are precise and devastating.
Tell me about it.
So you have these massive plumes of sulfur dioxide, SO2, and nitrogen oxides, no NOx, floating up into the clouds.
Right.
Clouds, of course, are just suspended atmospheric water vapor. When these pollutant gases interact with the water molecules H2O and sunlight, a profound chemical transformation occurs.
What happened?
The rainwater acts as a solvent and a reactant. It converts the sulfur dioxide, SO2, into H2SO4,
Okay.
and it converts the nitrogen oxides, NaOX, into HNO2 and HNO3.
Okay, I want to translate those chemical formulas into their common names because most people, don't speak in chemical shorthand.
Right, of course.
But they will instantly recognize the common names of these substances.
Oh, absolutely.
H2SO4 is sulfuric acid.
Yes.
That is the highly corrosive acid used in car batteries and industrial manufacturing.
Exactly.
HNO2 is nitrous acid, and HNO3 is nitric acid, which is used to make explosives and fertilizers.
Yes, it is.
We are taking our daily commute exhaust, sending it up into the clouds, mixing it with water, and literally manufacturing industrial-grade acids in the sky.
It's wild to think about. And this profoundly alters the fundamental nature of the rain that falls back down to Earth.
I can imagine.
To understand just how drastic this change is, we have to look at the natural baseline.
Okay, what is normal rain like?
Normal, unpolluted rainwater is actually already slightly weakly acidic.
Oh, really? It is not perfectly neutral.
No, it isn't. This is because normal atmospheric air contains natural carbon dioxide. And as rain falls through the air, it dissolves some of that CO2, creating a very weak carbonic acid.
Ah, okay.
Because of this, the pH of normal, healthy rain is usually around 5.6 to 6.0.
Right, and here's where it gets really interesting and honestly incredibly alarming when you look at the math.
Yes, the math is staggering.
When rainwater dissolves these new man-made acidic pollutants, the sulfuric and nitric acids, it becomes significantly more acidic and its pH reduces to 4.
Yes, down to a 4.
Now, if you are just casually listening to this, a drop from 5.6 down to 4 sounds like a very minor change.
It sounds like nothing.
Right. It sounds like the temperature dropping 1.5 degrees on your thermostat. You wouldn't even put on a sweater for that. It sounds like no big deal.
And that assumption is exactly the danger of misunderstanding how the pH scale works.
Because it's not linear, is it?
Exactly. The pH scale is not linear like a ruler or a thermometer. The pH scale is logarithmic.
Let's pause and really unpack this for the listener. What exactly does logarithmic mean in the context of acidity?
It means that every single whole number drop on the pH scale represents a 10-fold increase in the concentration of hydrogen ions.
Which is what makes something acidic.
Exactly. It is based on powers of 10. So if you drop from a pH of 6 down to a pH of 5, the rain isn't slightly more acidic, it is exactly 10 times more acidic.
Wow.
A drop from 6 to 4 means it is 10 times 10. 100 times more acidic.
So when we casually state that the pH of the rain reduces from its natural 5.6 down to 4, we are not talking about a slight adjustment.
Not at all.
We are talking about a massive, violent shift in the chemical makeup of the water falling from the sky.
Yes.
To put it in perspective, pure water is a 7. Black coffee is around a 5. A pH of 4 puts this rain in the same acidity bracket as tomato juice or certain types of vinegar.
Just let that sink in.
It is a fundamental transformation of a life-giving resource.
It is the literal weaponization of the rain.
Seriously.
The clouds are pulling water evaporated from our oceans and lakes, mixing it with the invisible exhaust from our daily commutes, cooking it with sunlight, and raining down a corrosive cocktail of sulfuric and nitric acids over thousands of square miles.
And once it's in the rain, gravity takes over, the acid rain falls.
Down it comes.
But as I dug deeper into what actually happens when this rain hits the ground, I realized that the real horror isn't just the acid itself.
Yeah.
You don't walk outside in acid rain and have your skin melt off like in a sci-fi movie.
Thankfully, no.
The real danger is what the acid does to the earth it lands on. It triggers a silent, incredibly deadly crisis in our water systems.
Yes. The cascade of secondary biological and chemical effects is actually far worse than the acid itself.
Really?
Yeah, when acid rain hits the earth, The very first point of contact is the soil and the rocks.
Yes, and this is where a very specific chemical process occurs. The acidic water hits the soil and the rocks, and it begins to leach heavy metals out of them, eventually discharging these metals into our rivers, streams, and lakes.
Right.
And specifically, we are talking about aluminum, mercury, lead, and chromium.
Let's really focus on that specific verb you used, leaches.
Yeah, this was a massive aha moment for me when I was reviewing the chemistry.
It's a game changer.
Wait, so the aluminum, the mercury, the lead, the chromium, these highly toxic heavy metals are already in the rocks and the dirt.
Yes.
The acid rain doesn't bring them from the sky.
Exactly. That is what makes this entire process so insidious.
Wow.
These heavy metals, aluminum in particular, which is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, they are naturally present everywhere in the soil.
Okay, so they're just there.
But under normal, healthy, pH-balanced environmental conditions, they are locked away.
Locked away.
They are chemically bound incredibly tightly within the mineral structures of the rocks and the clay. They are inert. They are completely safe because they cannot dissolve into the water.
So the acid rain is acting like a skeleton key?
A skeleton key that unlocks a geological poison vault.
Oh, man.
When the highly acidic rainwater, loaded with extra hydrogen ions, flows through the soil, a process called cation exchange occurs.
Cation exchange. Got it.
The hydrogen ions essentially barge in and kick the heavy metal ions out of their safe mineral bonds.
They evict them.
Exactly. The acid rain dissolves the bonds holding those metals in place, flushes them out of the rocks, mobilizes them into a liquid state, and sweeps them directly into the groundwater.
Which then flows into our rivers and lakes.
Yeah.
And that leads to two immediate devastating consequences.
It does.
The first is a direct threat to human health. A vast portion of our drinking water comes from groundwater aquifers, rivers, and reservoirs that are fed by this runoff.
Right, our municipal water supply.
We use this water for drinking purposes. And when we consume water tainted with leached heavy metals, these metals don't just pass through us.
No, they do not.
They accumulate in the human body to a toxic level.
It's a process called bioaccumulation. Your body is not designed to easily process or expel heavy metals like mercury or lead.
Right.
If you ingest a tiny amount, it gets stored in your tissues, particularly in your bones and your brain.
That's terrifying.
And over time, as you keep drinking the water or eating the crops irrigated by that water or eating the fish from that water, the concentration of the metals in your body multiplies.
It just builds up.
Lead and mercury toxicity leads to severe neurological damage, cognitive decline, kidney failure, and a host of severe physiological problems.
Especially in children, right, whose brains are still developing.
Exactly. We are slowly poisoning our own drinking wells simply by driving to work.
It's terrifying.
Yeah.
But the second consequence of these unlocked metals, well, this is where the reality of the situation gets incredibly dark.
Yes, the aquatic life.
Right. It highlights a biological horror that I had never, ever considered before this deep dive. It focuses on the aquatic life living in these lakes, specifically the fish.
The data on this is heartbreaking.
The data shows that an especially high concentration of aluminum ions specifically targets and clogs the fish gills. It causes suffocation and ultimately the death of the fish.
This is a biological detail that deserves intense scrutiny because it totally shatters a very common misconception about pollution.
What's the misconception?
When most people hear the phrase acid rain killing fish, they naturally assume that the water simply becomes so acidic that it chemically burns the fish.
Right.
Imagine a lake turning into a vat of acid and the fish just dissolving.
I will admit that is exactly what I pictured, just a highly corrosive pool burning their skin.
Right, but the biological reality is much more complex, much more mechanical, and frankly, much more tragic.
How so?
It is not the acid burning the fish directly, it's the acid releasing the aluminum from the soil on the mountainside.
Okay, the
aluminum ions flow down the streams and pool into the lake. Now you have to understand a fish's anatomy.
Okay.
Fish gills are incredibly delicate, highly specialized feathered organs designed to extract microscopic amounts of dissolved oxygen directly from the water into their bloodstream.
So they're very sensitive.
Extremely sensitive. When these leached aluminum ions encounter the gills, they severely irritate the extremely sensitive tissue.
So it acts as a massive irritant.
Yes. And just like your eye waters when you get a piece of dust in it, the fish's biological defense mechanism kicks in.
Oh, I see where this is going.
To protect the delicate gill tissue from the stinging irritation of the aluminum, the fish's goblet cells start producing excess mucus.
Oh, wow.
The aluminum causes such continuous, severe irritation that the fish produces so much thick, sticky mucus that it literally coats, binds, and seals off its own gills.
It traps itself.
Exactly. The physical barrier of the mucus becomes too thick. The dissolved oxygen in the water can no longer pass through the membrane into the fish's bloodstream.
So they can't breathe.
The high concentration of aluminum ions mechanically clogs the gills, using the fish's own immune response against it.
It's a multi-step chain reaction ending in suffocation.
Yes, it is.
Let's just track that entire path again just to make sure you listening are grasping the full scale of this.
Please do.
The invisible exhaust from a tailpipe in a morning traffic jam travels 100 miles on the wind, right?
Yes.
It cooks in the sun, turns into sulfuric acid, falls onto a pristine mountain forest, unlocks inert aluminum from a rock, washes that aluminum down into a valley lake, and causes the fish to slowly suffocate in its own defensive mucus because its gills are glued shut.
It is astounding.
That is just, it's mind-blowing.
It perfectly demonstrates the incredible fragility and the deep interconnectedness of our natural systems.
It really does.
A localized chemical change in the air over a highway translates directly to a mechanical failure of a respiratory organ underwater hundreds of miles away. You cannot separate one from the other.
And unfortunately, the destruction isn't just limited to the lakes and the rivers.
No, it is not.
Our deep dive takes us out of the water and into the very heart of our cities and our ancient forests. Because this acidic concoction isn't aiming, it's falling everywhere.
It covers everything.
Let's turn our attention to what happens when acid rain falls on our civilization, on the things we have built to last forever.
This is where it gets really visible.
When acid rain hits our cities, it specifically attacks the calcium carbonate present in the marble and limestone of buildings and monuments. Thus, these buildings are getting dull and eroded day by day.
Right. Calcium carbonate is the structural chemical foundation of some of the most historically significant architecture and art on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
For millennia, human beings have used marble and limestone to build our greatest monuments. From the Parthenon in Greece, to the Taj Mahal in India, to the gargoyles of Notre Dame, to the gravestones in our local cemeteries.
Because they're beautiful.
We use these materials because they are beautiful to carve, and under normal, natural, environmental conditions, they're incredibly durable. They're meant to stand for centuries.
Right. I was actually trying to find a good way to visualize this chemical attack on the stone.
What did you think of?
It's almost like the acid rain is giving these ancient monuments osteoporosis.
Oh, wow.
Like, we're literally dissolving their calcium carbonate bones from the outside in.
That is a remarkably accurate analogy. Human bones and limestone share a very similar calcium-based chemistry.
Really?
Yes. When the sulfuric and nitric acids in the rain hit the marble or limestone, a direct neutralization reaction occurs.
Okay, what does that mean chemically?
The acid reacts with the calcium carbonate. It essentially transforms the hard, insoluble solid stone into a powdery, soluble salt called calcium sulfate, or gypsum.
Soluble salt, so it can dissolve.
Yes, and because calcium sulfate is soluble in water the very next time it rains, that newly formed salt simply washes away down the gutter.
Oh, that is so sad.
It really is.
The sharp, intricate, hand-carved details of a centuries-old statue, the folds of a robe, the features of a face, they just melt, blur, and wash down the storm drain.
It's washed away.
The research uses the words dull and eroded day by day. We are quite literally dissolving our own history, melting away the physical markers of human civilization because of the invisible exhaust from our daily commutes.
We are erasing our past to fuel our present. It is a slow, relentless erosion.
It's heartbreaking when you frame it like that. We build these monuments to last forever, to outlive us, and then the byproduct of our daily convenience just eats them away.
Exactly.
But as tragic as the loss of human monuments is, it pales in comparison to the final effect detailed in the ecological data.
Yes, the forests.
The ultimate threat is to the very lungs of our planet, the forests.
The effects of acid rain on forests painted a terrifying picture of a holistic, systemic collapse of an entire ecosystem.
It's not just one thing.
No. When you look at a dying forest affected by acid rain, it isn't just one single thing killing the trees. It is a highly coordinated, multi-pronged chemical assault that attacks the tree from the ground up and from the sky down.
Let's break down this assault step by step based on the sources. First, the acid rain significantly increases the acidity of the soil itself.
Right.
It alters the fundamental pH of the dirt. Many crucial crops and native plants simply cannot grow properly in highly acidic soil.
The chemistry is wrong for their biology.
Right. Second, as we discussed with the lakes, the acid increases the presence of toxic, mobilized heavy metals in the soil that actively poison the vegetation. We are back to the skeleton key unlocking the vault.
Exactly. The same mobilized aluminum that washes into the lakes to suffocate the fish is also bathing the roots of the trees in the forest.
And aluminum is bad for roots.
Highly toxic to root systems. It burns and stunts the fine root hairs.
Ouch.
When the roots are damaged by the heavy metals, the tree can no longer effectively absorb essential water or the natural nutrients it needs to survive.
And to make matters worse, those essential nutrients might not even be there anymore, right? Because the acid rain washes them away.
Yes, exactly. Vital soil nutrients like calcium and magnesium, which trees need to build cell walls and create chlorophyll, are dissolved by the acid rain.
And where do they go?
They are flushed deep into the subsoil, far below where the tree roots can reach them.
So the tree is just stranded.
The tree is left in soil that is toxic with aluminum and completely barren of nutrition.
That is brutal. Then there is the effect on the mature canopy. The research notes that even old, established trees are heavily affected by the acidity of the soil.
Right.
Their growth is retarded, they get dry, brittle, and eventually die. And finally, the acid attacks from above.
Yes, direct contact.
Acid rain directly damages the leaves of trees and plants, thus limiting their growth. It states that the plant's capability to resist cold or diseases reduces, and ultimately they die.
It acts like an environmental immune system suppressant for the plants.
It literally steals their natural resistance to cold weather and common diseases.
It is a devastating three-pronged attack. Think about a towering ancient pine tree, or a massive oak that has lived for 300 years.
Okay, picture that.
First, the acid rain strips the soil of its vital nutrients, washing away the calcium and magnesium. The soil is starved. Second, the acid unlocks the toxic heavy metals, which actively assault and burn the roots. The roots are poisoned.
Starved and poisoned.
And third, the highly acidic rain falls directly on the canopy, physically burning and eroding away the waxy protective cuticle, coating right off the leaves and needles.
And without the leaves.
Exactly. The leaves are damaged, meaning the tree can no longer photosynthesize sunlight into food properly.
It's being starved from below, poisoned at the roots, and chemically burned from above, all at the exact same time.
Precisely. And as the research explicitly notes, this relentless stress completely shatters the plant's biological immune system, reducing its capability to resist cold or diseases.
So they can't fight off anything else.
Exactly. A massive ancient tree that has stood strong through centuries of harsh blizzards and droughts suddenly succumbs to a mild late spring frost.
Just because it's so weak.
Or it gets wiped out by a common bark beetle infestation that it normally would have easily fought off with sap.
Wow.
But because its defenses are completely gone, destroyed by the acid, it gets dry, its growth stops, and it dies. Whole swaths of ancient forests high up in the mountains where cars have never even driven are wiped out.
So we have covered an immense amount of ground today. What does this all mean for you listening right now?
That's a lot to take in.
We started this deep dive sitting in the driver's seat of your car during a mundane morning commute. We looked at the absolute necessity for the government to step in with macro planning because individual choices are trapped in a flawed system.
Yes, the tragedy of the commons.
We explored the short-term engineering fixes, mandating catalytic converters, adding anti-knocking agents, and transitioning to cleaner, simple molecule alternative fuels like ethanol to achieve complete combustion.
The Band-Aids.
Right, the Band-Aids. And we looked at the massive civilization-level long-term solutions, like shifting entirely away from CO2-producing fuels to electric vehicles.
And fundamentally redesigning our big cities with efficient public transit systems to get us out of our individual metal boxes altogether.
Yes. We then traced the invisible gases, the sulfur dioxide, and the nitrogen oxides as they escaped the tailpipes and floated up into the troposphere.
The chemical weapons factory in the sky.
We saw how they mix with the water cycle, violently dropping the pH of the rain from a natural 5.6 all the way down to a 4 on a logarithmic scale, literally weaponizing the clouds into sulfuric and nitric acids.
And we tracked that acid as gravity pulled it back to Earth.
We sure did.
We saw how it acts as a skeleton key, unlocking heavy metals like toxic aluminum from the soil, flushing it into our drinking water.
And washing it into lakes where it causes fish to slowly suffocate in their own biological defenses.
Yes.
We watched it chemically neutralize the calcium carbonate of our greatest historical monuments, giving human history a form of architectural osteoporosis.
And we saw it launch a coordinated, three-pronged attack on our ancient forests.
Starving, poisoning, and stripping the immune systems of old-growth trees until they dry up and die.
It all circles back to that initial psychological observation.
Right, about the blind spot.
This massive, world-altering chain of events is triggered by an act the average citizen commits daily without ever considering its consequences.
Yeah.
But once you take the time to understand the chemistry, the biology, and the mechanics of that chain reaction, those consequences become absolutely impossible to ignore.
It means that the choices we make, and more importantly, the systemic government regulations shaping and guiding those choices, dictate the actual physical chemistry of the sky above us.
It really does.
The exhaust you create doesn't just disappear into the ether, it transforms the very world we live in.
And as we wrap up today's deep dive, this raises an incredibly important question for you to consider, drawing directly from the atmospheric data we studied.
Oh, I like a good closing thought. What is it?
When you look at the meteorological models of how these pollutants behave, there is a very specific, chilling detail.
What's the detail?
The models show the exhaust rising, and they explicitly note that the pollutant gases travel long distances.
Long distances. They don't stay where they are made.
Exactly. The exhaust you produce in your city today during your commute might not fall as acid rain on your city.
Right.
It gets swept up into the high-altitude atmospheric currents. It travels hundreds, sometimes thousands of miles, and it might suffocate a pristine lake, or dissolve a historical monument, or kill an ancient forest in a completely different state, or even a completely different country.
Wow. So the borders don't matter at all.
When our pollution goes airborne, it ignores all human borders. So the question becomes, whose jurisdiction does the destruction fall under?
That is a great question.
Who is ultimately responsible when the toxic clouds we create in one place rain down devastation on someone else's home?
That is a heavy, profound thought to leave on. The invisible, undeniable interconnectedness of all our actions.
Indeed.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Next time you turn the key, just take a moment to think about the journey that is about to begin. Keep looking up, keep looking closely, and always keep questioning the world around you.